Today we're interviewing Roman Gunn, the Chief Product Officer of Fevo. It's a pleasure to be interviewing you today. My name is Raul Kaworu. I'm a freshman at St. Paul School and the Vice President of CompanyRoots.
My name is Suresh Jasti. I'm a junior at Homedale High School, and I'm the founder of CompanyRoots. Before we start the interview, I just wanted to thank you for taking your time and allowing us to interview you today. The first question that we always ask is, what were your company roots and how did they help you get into Fevo?
So first off, thank you for having me. Really appreciate you guys setting this all up. So my company roots actually started with a bunch of freelance work, after which I founded my own startup called Giving Bell. My co-founder and I, we did a bunch of traveling together, and we met a bunch of people during that time. And we came back to New York. We were going about our lives, doing what it is that we were doing at the time. I was freelancing. He was working in an investment bank. And we just started seeing each other more and more at people's weddings. So it was all our mutual friends' weddings. And we just started, and we were about in our early 20s at the time. And we were just like, oh man, how are our friends doing this? They're going to go broke doing this. And, they were. And we just started finding out more and more that, people were doing these luxurious things that they maybe couldn't totally afford. And we were like, wait, so what can we be doing for them aside from, going to the wedding and giving a gift? And we decided to start a company that kind of helped out. It started off as more of a crowdfunding, kind of like a Kickstarter for weddings model. And then kind of pivoted to selling golden tickets, which was your entry to a wedding. So it was almost kind of like a legalized wedding crashing thing.
Yeah.
So you can go experience new cultures, meet new people. You've never been to a Russian wedding or an Indian wedding or a Japanese wedding. You can go and you can experience that, kind of meet new people. You could do research for your own weddings.
Yeah.
Kind of just whatever it is that made sense for you at the time, whether it be connecting with people or doing your own research, you were able to do that. So started off there. And this is around the time when the Social Network came out, right? So everyone was watching that movie and was like, oh man, I got to build a startup. I could make so much money. So there was an opportunity there to work with a bunch of people. So I worked in both advisory roles and kind of just getting my hands dirty and just working for a lot of equity at the time to just try to build up these companies and see what happened. And I found it really fun because your learning's really accelerated in startups, and especially when you're working at a few at a time and just kind of seeing what the different problem sets are and taking those learnings and applying them to other problems. You get to really iterate quickly, and it was fun, and it became something that I was really into, and so I took that, and eventually when we decided to shut down Giving Bell, I went to agency life. Within agencies, I got to work with a bunch of successful companies and upstart companies and kind of peer into what they were doing and work with them for a limited amount of time as well. And I thought that was really great. And eventually I just felt like I needed to be really connected to the product I was working on. And that's how I got to Fevo.
Well, kind of going to the point of you working at startups and then going to agencies. So would you say that there is a big difference between the hustle and bustle of a small startup that's just kind of straggling to make it on, and being at a big company that already has things in place? How would you describe that difference for you personally?
So there's definitely a difference there. I'd say that generally, even in the agency world, most agencies aren't big companies. So in both situations, you're going to be having to wear multiple hats. But generally, I think the difference is in between agency and a startup is that generally in one, you have to live with your decisions more. In a startup, you make a decision and then you stick with it, and then you have to keep iterating on it.
Yeah.
And in an agency, you produce the product and then you kind of hand it over to the team and they run with it. So I think that's the difference in structure there. But to answer your question more concisely in terms of big companies versus smaller agile shops, it's how quickly things move. It's really just the autonomy of decision making and just being able to rally quickly. In smaller companies, there's a lot more of, hey, this is our goal. right now, let's turn on a dime to focus on this. Whilst in bigger companies, there's more structure around both.
Yeah.
What are our short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals? Although I'd argue that a lot of companies don't really think medium and long-term, and they're really focused on the short-term. But
Yeah.
So going back to your roots, what was your childhood like, and did you ever imagine yourself getting into a business like Fevo?
so my childhood was really interesting in some ways because I grew up in Brooklyn, right?
Mhm.
So for me, I got to hang out with people of all different races, religions, skin pigmentations, and
Yeah.
walks of life, right? So for me, I've always kind of just been surrounded around lots of different types of people. And it when I grew up and went into more structured environments, kind of started seeing silos between those different types of groups and people. Uh,
Mhm.
I became the person that connected between all of them.
Yeah.
So being that type of unifier really resonates with what Fevo does, which makes it really easy to work out the logistics and bringing people, especially it, like going to a concert or a festival with lots of different types of groups of friends can be like difficult because it's like, do I really want to create a group chat with like 30 different people who don't know each other? And then you're going to spend a day of being like, whose number is this? Who's that person?
Yeah. Yeah.
Person? Can I have these inside jokes here? Can I not? Right. So being able to have a platform where it's just like, hey guys, I'm going to this thing. Here's a link. I'm going to send it out. You're all going to sit next to me. You don't have to do a thing but pay. That's it. That's
Mhm.
something that's like it's really helped with me and like my personal life. So it really attracted me to the Vivo value prop. But in terms of my childhood and knowing whether I would end up doing this, um, I don't know. Uh, I don't think that as a child I really had a great concept of anything other than exploration, which I think was supported by where I went to high school. Um, where I went to high school was a school called Edward R. Murrow.
Mhm.
And at the time, it was really kind of free reign. And you could pick your own classes and kind of the subject matter you're into. So it was almost kind of like a college environment in high school.
Mhm.
So right from then, being able to kind of dictate what I learned and how I learned um, made me in those formative years kind of aware that I like the freedom to figure out things and figure out the right structure for me. So I
Yeah.
think in that regard, my childhood definitely informed me liking to work in a more loose environment, a place where, you know, everyone can kind of like work together and figure out what has to be done rather than always following a set process.
Yeah. And like when you were in high school, were there any like do you have any examples of like courses that you used to take?
So in high school, I actually took law classes. I took
Mhm.
business classes. I took psychology classes. I took astronomy classes.
Wow.
Those
Yeah.
were things that were like really interesting, and that extended into like my college experience, where I just started taking classes that had nothing to do with my major and nothing to do with like the course selection of classes that were taught. So I started taking things like archaeology, archival management, anthropology, and
Mhm.
archival management was a particularly interesting one because I didn't even know this world existed. It was
Yeah.
much just going like we had this like library, and I didn't even know that there was like this basement floor of the library with like these little like lab rooms that were set up just for preserving old newspapers and old books,
Yeah.
and like figuring out that one, this whole world exists, and two, like the process behind that, like that type of stuff was really interesting for me. And it's like you take that type of stuff and then you balance it with something like an Eastern Studies class, and then you take like a computer science class. It really helps you like broaden your perspective on things. And I think that's the type of thing that helps you develop lateral thought. It
Mhm.
helps you be able to take, here's point A, here's point Z. You know, let me just jump like through these things, but I don't have to lay out A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because it's like you jump into various points of the
Yeah.
spectrum. You're able to like pick out things and make connections a little bit quicker than if you were just always like focused on one thing.
Yeah. And then like for me, like this year I'm taking economics. So like I had the choice of going to like take AP Bio or like AP Chem, stuff like that. And then I realized I wasn't as interested in like STEM categories. So I just
Mhm.
went for more humanities type of thing. I'm thinking about following that up for next year as well. But like it all depends on like how it goes really.
That's awesome. And I think behavioral economics is like particular really interesting field that
Yeah.
influences
Wow.
everything from how we spend money to how people think to marketing. I think that, there's still a lot of quantitative stuff that we haven't really nailed in
Yeah.
terms of how people interact day to day. And there's patterns to all these things. So I
Yeah.
think economics is a big underpinning of that.
Hmm. So I was actually curious how you got into product building. So like what set of classes or were there any people that influenced you into getting into like this field?
So I wouldn't say that there were any specific classes that did that for me. I think that going back to my childhood and being able to communicate with lots of different groups of people and
Hmm.
just like knowing that like, hey, most everyone's moving towards the same goals. It's just everyone has a different communication style, maybe different KPIs in which they measure these things, but people tend to be moving towards the same goals more or less. So kind of in my childhood, that learning that was pretty important. But then I think when I was doing freelance work, I uh, I started working with this one designer in particular, and we did a lot of like cool work. And what ended up happening there was one day I got a little bit tired maybe of doing freelance work, and I was like, let me see if I should do a regular 9 to 5 job. So I was like, I called up my designer friend. I'm like, hey, dude, let me come over. Like, want to work on a resume for me.
Hmm.
So I went there and we're like, all right, let's work on this resume. But at the end of the night, we didn't have like a resume for me. We had a piece of propaganda. It was literally like a 20 Soviet inspired like piece of propaganda. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. Um, so started doing that, and I just had this now personal branding campaign until one day I got a phone call from of mine, and he was a VC. And at the time, I didn't really know as much or appreciate venture capital as much as I do today. So I was like, okay, this guy like wants to like do lunch. We'll do lunch. Cool. So we go there, and I essentially walked out of there, head of marketing for the startup that he was putting together. And my personal branding campaign that I was doing with this designer was essentially going to be the baseline of the marketing campaign for the startup, right? So how and why I kind of got to product today is in part with this designer who I worked with named Nate Gorelick, as well as the Gabe family who I met and worked on this thing called social brand with. So if there's some people that I think helped me become a product person and brought me here, I'd say it was Nate and the Gabe family, because there was a bunch of people there that I did various freelance work and worked with Ellie, who did M&A work. So yeah, there's a I think that was my start of being a product person. So that family and that person, I think, would be who I would attribute a good part of my jump off point to. And obviously my parents, because they allowed me to always experiment and learn and kind of figure out who I want to be, instead of just being like, here's your path and you have to follow it. You're going to go be a doctor now. It's like, I'm sure they always had some sort of aspirations for me in terms of those regards and may have nudged me lightly towards that, but they always knew that I was my own person. I'd always be happiest if I was capable of exploring and figuring out the right path for me. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So in the field and industry you're in right now, what are some requirements you need to be successful, and what are some obstacles you face right now?
So in order to be successful, you need to be really good at active listening. So when you hear someone speak to you, it's not just about, hey, I'm waiting for my turn to reply. It's actually really engaging with what they're saying and trying to process what they're saying. And in the back of your mind, hopefully starting to already create solutions for it
Yeah.
as they're proposing problems, but also not proposing solutions until you've fully heard their problems and you've asked other people who are in the same seat to also hear about their problems, because everyone, and I'm sorry if my Slack keeps popping up and you're hearing that, but
Which I haven't read here.
everyone everyone has a perspective. And I think that in order to solve problems holistically, you need to hear the perspective of quite a few people, combine that, and then really just start prioritizing and understanding, hey, what's going to solve these problems quicker? Uh, and then being able to then show them kind of what your solution set is, and then having them validate whether that solution set is valid or not, right? Like it's one thing to be like, oh yeah, I think I have this great idea. It's another thing to have the people who are actually suffering with a specific problem say, yeah, this is a great solution to my problem.
Yeah.
So listening actively, um, and then proposing things, iterating on those things, and letting them out into the wild and just seeing how people use it. I think that's really what product development is kind of about. Lots of great, so again, relationship building, listening, problem solving, iterating. Those are the things in terms of struggles and risks and challenges today. So I guess generally in technology, there's always kind of been this debate between closed systems and open systems, like Microsoft and Apple in the beginning, and then
Yeah.
like an iPhone versus an Android device.
Yeah.
So it's about really control of the entire process versus configuration and personalization. So when you're building products, particularly like enterprise level products, you have to really walk that fine balance of being able to build things that make a lot of people happy versus making important clients happy versus, hey, is this something we could really punt on? So the risk of, hey, what is too closed a system, what is too open a system, because you're dealing with like paying clients, that's something that's always challenging, like
Yeah.
walking that line.
So, your personal philosophy on the Fevo website was using crazy and outright insane ideas to change the world. How should like normal people and like from any age approach like just you know getting these crazy ideas and actually like taking action on them?
So I think in terms of getting crazy ideas, that's up to the individual. I don't think that everyone inherently can develop a quote unquote crazy idea, but I think what people can do is look at the problems that exist in any specific space, uh, and while being aware of solutions that happened in other spaces. I think that people tend to be dogmatic when they've been in a specific field, industry, sector, job, whatever it is for too long. They're like, but this was the way. So I think you need to be able to look at, well, what did people do in totally different fields?
Yeah.
How were they able to solve that problem? And thinking about, wait, so what happens if I apply that to like my particular situation or field or industry or problem set or whatever it is? It's that lateral thought. I think that type of thing is really important. Um, and I think that in terms of crazy ideas, it's really just about having white space and starting really wide and then whittling things down, because sometimes there's really actual practical and implementations to crazy ideas that make things like really convenient.
Mm-hmm.
Like Netflix streaming was like first
Yeah.
sending out DVDs to people. That's a crazy idea.
Yeah.
But you look at like the distribution of mail at the time. It's like, well, everyone needs to get their news to them, right? And then, like people were reading like newspapers and magazines at the time. It's like, well, they don't have to necessarily go to a newsstand to get them. They can just get them shipped to home. So why can't they do that with entertainment? And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. And then it became, wait, why does someone have to wait for that like CD or DVD, whatever, Blu-ray to get delivered? Why can't I just stream it? So it's like, okay, so now I have this like streaming solution.
Yes.
So it's taking the solution that existed for other forms of content consumption and bringing it there. I actually think that in some ways, Netflix is always going to lag behind print, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is like a weird, crazy thing to say because everyone consumes videos. No one likes to read now, but it's always easier to like transmit the smallest bit of data, right? It's always easier to like follow like you started with like SMSs before you got to like BlackBerry Messenger, before you got to like iMessage or whatever, right? So it's like you always have to like follow the shortest bit of communication and consumption of that before you can like develop more evolved forms of media for it. So
Yeah.
that type of thing's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, what would you say, like, going back to the crazy idea part, how would you say you should identify a crazy idea you should follow up upon versus a crazy idea that's just outright, I don't want to say stupid, but outright like not gonna work?
So you don't always know whether something's not like going to work or not, which a good framework for figuring that out is like an MVP, a minimal viable product.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to figure out what's the easiest, cheapest way to validate whether my crazy idea works, and being able to like implement that. Um, with something like, say, if I was building like a back to distribution type thing, like an Instacart, where I wanted to like create a service where other people would call me up and shop and or place an order with me online and have me go to the store, shop for them, and deliver it to them. What would
Mm-hmm.
like the easiest, simplest way to test that crazy idea out? I don't know. Maybe create a Facebook group with all my friends and offer them that service. Maybe it's creating a post on Craigslist and doing that. At that point in time, I didn't invest anything on building a website, building an app, using a branding agency, hiring a bunch of people. I'm just like, hey, is anyone interested in the service? I'm using tools that are free and available to me to validate whether anyone's interested before investing any money.
So it's
So
like a market test almost.
yeah, that's exactly what it is. You're just like testing like, hey, what is the smallest thing that I can do to validate this? And if there's some traction and validation there, build something a little bit bigger, and then build something a bit more bigger than that. And then figure out if it's worth raising money or if you want to like do it yourself or whatever it is. But yeah, start with the smallest possible way to test it, and then scale it. But speaking of crazy ideas and things and starting things up, one, CompanyRoots. How do you get that domain name? Like,
Well, I mean, so when originally I had the idea to like, I always wanted to like make my own vlog because I saw a lot of gamers doing it. I saw a lot of people from like everything, writers doing it. So I'm like, I want to make a blog, and what do I want to make it on? Well, I'm not sure. So I'm like, I'm going to make my blog about being not sure about what I want to do. So I'm like, I'm interested in like so many different things and I want to know more about things. So then I got this kid over here, and I mean, we kind of just made it together. We kind of grew it. We talked to entrepreneurs because we're both interested in like being innovative, being creative, and trying to change the world. And so I feel like by talking to people like you who've already like taken the steps needed to get to the point where you can change the world. Because right now that's what you're doing in Fevo. You're letting people experience things that they couldn't have done before. So kind of learning about those experiences was really important. And then we just made CompanyRoots as it was like that.
that's really cool, and I think it's a great name, and the fact that you guys were able to acquire it is really cool. And my that personal branding campaign that I was speaking about earlier, the entire concept behind that campaign was, who is Roman Gunn? It was an entire existential question,
Yeah.
and that's how that came. So I think you got the jump on me. You started this way earlier. I think some good's gonna come of that.
Well, I mean, that's a lot because of the internet age we're living in right now, because we're able to do it actually. Like I'm sure when you were a kid, you would not have been able to just create a blog like that out of nowhere. Whereas now
No,
we can do that.
when I was a kid, I could have set up an away message on AIM, and I'm sure you guys have no idea what AIM is.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know.
so what are your favorite video games? Since you've like seen video game streamers do it, what are you guys playing today?
Well, I mean, Rahul plays Fortnite.
Like, I think everyone
but
plays Fortnite
I've
nowadays.
kind of gotten out of the gaming setting after freshman year, and I've focused a lot more on sports and stuff. So we both play tennis. So that's what I do more now.
Nice.
And then obviously schoolwork is pretty hectic. So a lot of focus there.
Very cool.
Yeah. So speaking of ideas, I'm actually pretty curious about your past entrepreneurship startup on creating a wedding crasher business. And could you please explain a little bit more about that and why you would ever want to leave that business voluntarily?
So the honest answer is monetization. We just couldn't monetize it properly.
Mm-hmm.
But so essentially, the model we had at first was kind of like a Kickstarter thing where we take a percentage off of funding of a wedding, right? So that was whatever, 7 to 10%.
Yeah.
So for something that you're collecting a few $1,000s on, that's a serviceable amount. We can make a business model out of that. In terms of selling access to people's weddings for these tickets, like most people when they like throw a wedding and they have like a seat at the wedding, it's going to be at least like $125 or so.
Yeah.
So if like someone's going to be going and spending a ticket to a wedding, it's already a really weird concept. So throwing a bunch of like service fees on top of that didn't like really sit right with us, and we didn't think there was a very that was a threshold that a lot of people were going to pass. So
Mhm.
we did the same model, which is take a percent of the seat price. So we weren't inflating the price or whatever. So whatever the couple was setting, we would take a percentage of that.
Mhm.
And it just, the volume wasn't there to really properly monetize it. Although I think that if we gave it a whirl again today, I think it would have considerable more traction today. Now, because the sharing economy was still around then, but it wasn't as matured as it is today.
Yeah.
So if I were to have a weekend hackathon project and launch this thing again today, one of the tools would be there to do it a lot quicker, and maybe people would be more comfortable with it.
Yeah. So kind of going back to your like work at Fevo. So you've been through a lot with the company, serving as
Yeah.
the director of product, the vice president of product, the senior vice president of product and innovation, and now you're the chief product officer.
Yep.
So what is one thing you say that you take away from your days at Fevo?
I'm going to say something that I really learned from Ari, our CEO, which is that sequencing things properly is super important. Just knowing how to uh, the proper phases of a business, knowing exactly what phase you're in and the right mode to be in during that phase. I think that's something that I really learned here, and like being able to go into a situation and assessing right from the beginning and creating a projection around when am I going to be in those phases, and nailing that is both something that's really hard, but if you're capable of doing that, that just helps set you up for real like meaningful success.
Yeah.
So Fevo was built in NYC's article 50 Startups to Watch in 2018. So what would you say to the people who potentially want to join Fevo's family?
I'd say come join. It's a lot of fun. I think that Fevo has honestly the potential to, and everyone wants to be like a unicorn and like whatnot, but I actually truly believe that with the group of people we have, the dedication we have, and the foresight that we have going into these things, I think it's really possible that Fevo is not only going to be a unicorn, but a decacorn at some point. So I'm really happy to be a part of this team. And I think that anyone who just even wants to come in and maybe they're not even looking for a role, but just wants to see how Fevo operates, wants to check out the culture, reach out. I'm happy to make that happen.
And how would you describe like the workspace at Fevo? Like you guys are centered in New York?
Yeah, so we're our main office is in New York, but we're also a company that has a strong work from home culture.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that we hire really smart, talented people, and having them be in a specific space and at a specific time doesn't necessarily adhere to their productivity and the best way for them to output great work. So the things that are most meaningful for us is for people to be highly collaborative, to impress their coworkers, and to constantly just be bringing something new into the company.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about being in a company and learning there, which is really amazing and really important. But beyond that, you also need to be bringing things into the company for the company to be learning. So it's not just about you learning here. It's about you scaling the company with your knowledge. It's about both personal growth and you helping grow others.
Yeah. And how many people actually work at Fevo right now?
So we're getting near to 60. It's like in the mid it's like 56, 57 people right now. But it's gonna be like 60 people.
Yeah.
And what type of partners and events did Fevo get in contact with to gain traction in the community? And are the events normally recurring, or are they one time, or how does that work?
So most of our events are actually in the sports space.
Okay.
We have 75% of all Major League North American sports right now.
Wow.
That's all thanks to our like really incredible BD team. We
Mhm.
have like a rock star BD team. They do like a really great job.
So
So
so like with so how do you get into contact with these like organizations so that you get these direct tickets? 'Cause I found that like very curious how like it's kind of amazing actually that you get into direct contact with them. So when you're using Fevo, do you have to pay like a premium in order to like get these new tickets, or do you just pay a like a flat service to Fevo?
so trying to think about what I'm allowed to say here. Uh, Basically,
Sorry.
it's actually a phase thing. It's not just working with the teams directly. We also work with our primary integrators or primary ticketers. So we
Mhm.
work with Ticketmaster and Tickets.com and Paciolan, and we're integrated into them, and we're pulling inventory from them with
Yeah.
their blessing. We then go to these teams, reach out to their uh, VP of sales and or VP of marketing in the organization, whatever makes right is right for that specific organization. And then we work with the reps in that organization.
Mhm.
So a lot of teams have groups of sales reps. It could be like up to 30 people trying to sell out the stadium there. So what they have is they have those reps actually have their own roster of clients, whether it be someone like Lexus or the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts,
Yeah.
of that nature. So we go to them and we provide a product for them to make it easy for them to service their client base.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how.
Okay.
So we're kind of a B2B to C company in
Yeah.
that way. We,
Second.
we, we go with the integrators and the venue and the teams, and then we become the front facing product for consumers.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting because I know a lot of event planning businesses, they base their models either B2B only or B2C, meaning
Mhm.
like sometimes what they see is that businesses, meaning big corporations, when they're trying to get like business outings and stuff, they can usually make more money because the sheer amount of people in like one business is greater than like a small group of friends.
Yep.
But it's
All right.
very
I
interesting.
think it's also a matter of B2B versus B2C is a matter of acquisition costs
Yeah,
because you have to pay money to get people to come onto your website, to
yeah,
use your service, and like to make it sticky. And you probably don't like break even on their first transaction. So you have to wait for them to like come back again. And you have to figure out, hey, what's my runway and what's my burn rate? Am I going to make it to them like coming back a second time?
yeah,
So we wanted to like kind of stay away from having to fight those type of battles. And it's also about being a company that's egoless. Like we don't necessarily have to be that like a destination. You know, it's like we just want to provide great technology for like our partners who are great to be able to utilize us and for everyone to kind of be in a win-win-win scenario. You know,
yeah,
they happen to make more money, we make some money, and our consumers are happier because the logistics for them going to these events is considerably easier too.
yeah.
So we always end the interview off on the same question. What specific strategies would you give to the next generation of entrepreneurs and leaders looking to succeed in high school and beyond?
Go outside your comfort zone. Try things out. You know, take classes that you wouldn't necessarily think are a part of your core trajectory because you might be surprised where your core trajectory ends up, right?
Hmm.
Uh, I think that's really important. Uh, Talk and listen to people, like actually listen to people. I
Hmm.
think those are things that are really important.
Yeah,
And
active listening.
yeah, for specifically when you go to college, sometimes don't concern yourself with what class you're taking. Go find a professor that people are really, really into. Figure
Mhm.
out why. Figure out what makes this professor like such a rock star. So it doesn't even matter sometimes like what the subject matter is. It might be that person that's going to be someone that influences you or makes you want to learn like this new thing. So
Hmm.
uh, just open your mind a little bit and uh, give things a chance that aren't necessarily in your core swim lane.
All right. Well, I mean, thank you for
Thank you.
like being on Company Roots today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you guys. I really enjoyed getting to chat with you, and I appreciate you guys reaching out. And if you're ever in NYC and you want to check out the Fevo office, hit me up.